Welcome to the Shaman Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Chimbert, and today's guest is Len May. He's a pioneer in personalized medicine, genetics, and human optimization. As the CEO and co-founder of EndoDNA, Len has spent decades helping people understand how their unique biology influences everything from health and longevity to focus and performance. Thanks for being here today, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there anything I missed on your bio that you want to expand on? I'm sure we'll get into a lot of it.
I mean, I already think the bio is way too long, but I mean, it doesn't really say much. The thing is that, I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD, and somebody labeled me with this, you have a disorder. I'm like, okay, well, then there's something wrong with me. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who either have been diagnosed or undiagnosed. They think their brain works differently. So you're sort of a neurodivergent. And at some point I realized that is sort of my strength. And leaning into it creates all these different opportunities in your life. And it makes you understand, I guess, more of what doesn't fit for you than really finding your purpose. Because people talk about like all this stuff, like you gotta find your purpose. Well, I can have multiple purposes throughout my lifetime as long as I feel fulfilled. When the itch starts happening and you're ready to move on, a lot of people stick to, they're going to still stay at their desk, they don't have that motivation. And I think that's really what the difference is between a lot of people who are able to navigate and follow that strength, whatever I just mentioned, instead of like sitting and saying, I have bills to pay, I have all this stuff to do, and taking a risk. I'll do it tomorrow or next week, and you kind of push off, and then all of a sudden 20 years go by, and you're like, oh shit, I'm still at this desk, So that I think that's really what I wanted to convey. What I do now for the last, 10 years is not what I did my entire life. It's this notion of being a polymath, that if you're interested in something and you really are passionate about it for a moment, lean into it and like develop a level of mastery of that. And then if you no longer are motivated or inspired by that, it's in your pocket. It's not like you're never going to use it again in something else you do. So long-winded answer to your question about my bio, but yeah, that's kind of, so the point I was trying to make is I wrote a book about that. So that's not in my bio. It's called Jack of All Trades, Master of Some. And the reason why is somebody introduced me as a autodidactic polymath. I was like, I don't know what that means. I started reading, about what polymaths are. I'm like, okay. And I wondered if people with ADHD or some sort of neurodivergence, if they have a propensity to being polymaths. And in my research, like, oh yeah, especially look at the billionaires. So I couldn't find a book about it. So I wrote it.
Nice. Yeah, and I agree with all that too, because I have two kids right now. One's just turned 15, one's turning 11. And both of them are like, well, especially the 15-year-old, he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what I want to do when I get older. I'm like, try different things, see what sticks. I mean, find a job, see if you like it. If it doesn't work, find something else. Go to a trade school, try this, read a couple books. We're going to be homeschooling them next year. And it's like, all right, we're going to spend this next year and I'm going to take you to owners of shops who I know who are different trades. And I want you to just spend a month with them, see what sticks, see what's interesting. And it's like you said, you're never going to lose those skills. You can go study to be an electrician, decide you don't want to do that as a career, but guess what? Your house might need some electrical work once in a while. Like,
Right. Exactly.
it all comes in handy. Like, why limit yourself to, I have to do this one thing for the rest of my life, unless that's really what you want to do. That's fine. But there's nothing wrong with shifting paths, shifting careers. I find it more interesting to do that myself.
Yeah, and you're right about this. I have a podcast too, and I interview some really interesting people. And sometimes they're lucky. Like you're born And as a kid, you find a guitar, and that becomes like, I am going to do this for the rest of my life. Wonderful. That's not most people. That's some people. That's a unique thing. Like, you somehow connected to your purpose or your life's journey really early in life. And now you get to master that, 20, 50, 100,000 hours of just doing that. And that's your goal and your dream. Most people, like in my surroundings of all the people that, like my friends and everybody, I don't have anybody that said, all right, you know what? As a kid, I wanted to be a rock star, or something like that. But I didn't really do much to achieve that. And then my parents made sure that I don't pursue that path when I was a kid too, because like, what are you going to do? Be a musician, all that stuff. So can I use some of that when I speak on stages? And yeah, it's my rock star moment. It's not the same, but but the point that I was making is that some people are lucky to have that, and most of us have to find the things by, as you said, let's do things to find out what we don't like and keep it as a some sort of skill set.
Yep, exactly. And before we get too further in, can you explain what a polymath is? Because I've had one person on the show that mentioned that as well, but that's not a common term, at least
Yeah,
not in my world.
yeah. I mean, my definition of it is a polymath, somebody who can become an expert in something without having to go to school for that, and because they're so interested and passionate about learning a certain thing that they become an expert in that thing. So a good example of somebody like that is Leonardo da Vinci.
Hmm.
So he, obviously, we know he was a painter, right? But he was an inventor. He created weapons. He sculpted. He made architectural plans. Like, he would just lean into whatever he's interested in. But it's not just, hey, you know what? As a hobby, I'm going to do something. You actually lean into it and become an expert. You want to become great at multiple different things. And I really think that people who have some sort of neurodivergence, the reason why they have this connection of polymathy is because they recognize patterns and things most people don't recognize. So people talk about people that have ADHD, that they can multitask effectively. And I had a conversation with a guy who wrote a book about the one thing. You're only supposed to focus on the one thing. And very well known person. Anybody can go Google the one thing, you'll know who wrote the book. But I was trying to explain that my brain doesn't work like that. He's like, well, you can never be successful if you don't have the ability to focus. And I'm saying, I have the ability to focus, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on one thing. And he was saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's not impossible if you take something from the left, something from the right, and something from the middle. They may seem completely unrelated, but they are related in a certain way to me. And that is the way that you multitask. The issue with that is most people have these squirrel moments, right? So you're doing these things and you go down a rabbit hole and you're continuing to research and find. So you're not actually doing your researching, and you're getting ready to get ready all the time. And that's where discipline comes in and structure comes in, because if you do have this kind of brain, or you do process information in that way, now you have to create sort of guardrails for yourself so you don't have these squirrel moments.
Yeah, and I would say almost that would apply to a lot of people who don't have ADHD, because there's so many people who just keep researching the same thing and are
Mm.
watching a video about it, but they never take action. They never actually, oh, let me give this a try now. It's always about, I need more research. I need to know exactly how to do it 100% instead of just going out and trying.
Yeah.
And so with ADHD and neurodivergence, I'm trying to think of the right way to word this without offending anyone, because I don't mean this as an offense. Because we just learned recently, like, we think my wife has ADHD, we think my youngest son has it. And looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. But I also see a lot of people use that more as a crutch from actually going out and trying. It's like, oh, I can't do that because my ADHD is too hyper, or I'm the alphabet soup. I've heard people express it in this way. So, what can someone do that either thinks they have it or know they have it, utilize that to the best of their ability?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about this whole notion of trying to use something as a crutch. First of all, when you're labeled with a disorder,
Mhm.
you can use it two different ways. You can say, all right, well, I can't do that because I have this. Okay. So that's one way, and you're always using it as an excuse to not do something or to make sure that people don't say, or because you have a disorder, you have this label. Or you can look at it as, in spite of having this label, I'm going to overcome and do this anyway. That's another way to look at it. I look at it the third way. I look at it as, what advantage does that diagnosis give me? And then, being a polymath, let's dig into what it really means. What is ADHD? What does that really mean? Well, one of the ways, first of all, is genetic. You have genetic polymorphisms that are associated with ADD or ADHD, because there's different types, and they all lump it together now. But I never had the hyperactivity thing. I always had the daydreaming thing. And the reason why is, you're born with a depletion of dopamine. So your brain is always looking for that squirt of dopamine. One of the reasons why people procrastinate with ADHD is because the dopamine rush that you get, the squirt of it, is at the last moment. So if you're procrastinating and you have something due, well, you're behind, but that last hour, man, you're pushing it, and it's like, it feels amazing because you have all this dopamine that's getting into your brain, which you normally are lacking. Hence, shiny objects. So when you have something new, you're leaning into that, like, oh, wow, now you're getting a squirt of dopamine from that. So being able to, yes, absolutely. I'm not denying the fact that there's some limitations and there's some difficulties in the way your brain works, but it doesn't mean that this is something that's detrimental, that you have to use as a crutch in life. It just means you have to work on um, different habits and processes, and different things that you can do to be able to channel your life effectively into what you want to achieve. I can give a bunch of examples. So my ex-wife used to say to me, "Why do you eat the same thing for lunch every day?" And I'm like, well, because I'm going to stand in the fridge. I'm going to go through every different example of why this is good. Oh, this is going to take too long. Am I really in the mood for this? I don't have to think about it, right? So I'm going to do the same thing, and that doesn't interfere with my ADHD. Also, like things like, all right, I'll give you another example. It just recently happened to me. So I have a pretty extensive collection of vinyl. I'm a collector, music collector. And it was all over the place. I didn't organize it. So I have like stacks, and then I just put them in shelves. And I made a decision for myself. And this is where ADHD really, this is where it really comes in. I made a decision. I'm going to organize my albums. Okay. But I never thought of, well, how do I organize my albums? So then I was like, okay, I started doing it. I'm like, I don't, this is overwhelming. So most people they just don't complete the assignment. And that's one of the things with ADD. Like, I really want to do this. I'm going to do this, but it's too hard, or it's too confusing, or you find something else. So for me, I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple things. First of all, I'm going to chunk the whole experience. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to do a stack of vinyl at a time, just as much as I can kind of hold and put on the chair. So the second thing is, I created a system. So what system am I doing? So I was trying to figure out, I'm going to organize by category, by genre. No, I decided to do it all in alphabetical order, from left to right, regardless of what genre. So that's a decision that I made. So A through Z. And the other thing, how do I still, it's not fun. If I do it now, it's a chore. how do I make it fun for myself so I get the dopamine hit, because that's going to anchor me to wanting to do that. And the way I did that is I'm going to pull out albums I haven't listened to in a while. I'm going to put on that album. I'm going to listen to music as I'm doing this. So those are the things systems that you work out for yourself that, ground that and anchor it. It's like going to the gym. So I go to the gym. I'm not that guy like, oh man, I can't wait to get to the gym. I don't love it, but I go. And the reason why, I have to go to the gym in my mid 50s is, you have to work out, resistance train, all that stuff. But I love going to sauna afterwards. So to me, the gym is the process to get to the reward, which is that dopamine reward system that I get to go to the sauna afterwards.
Nice. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was going to ask you how are you going to categorize it, because there's so many different ways of doing it.
I used to be a music buyer for Tower Records, so I'm like, oh my God, do I have the vocal section? Do I have the jazz? Do I have this, that? I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Because then you have some things that are like, this album, it's in this genre. This album, it's over here. I mean, look at Beck. He had like a rock album, alternative rock, and then he went into country. Like, where do you put him?
Exactly.
And so with that, so what other things, I guess, because with your co-founding of the company dealing with DNA, EndoDNA, what were you finding with that? Were you finding other things that were tied into our DNA that we need to address and understand? Because I mean, for you, it doesn't seem like knowing you have ADHD isn't your crutch because you used it as your superpower, which is great. I'm always worried about people getting those labels of anything and then they get stuck in those labels.
Yeah.
So it's like, what else were you finding that maybe people don't know about that they could be using through their DNA?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand what DNA really is, like, and what that really means. So, like, when I was a kid, besides ADHD, my grandfather was a really large, physically large man. Not everybody in my family is sort of average height. Big guy, weighed a lot, was really tall, and he had a stroke. And he proceeded to have several different strokes. And he was paralyzed on one side, lost his speech and all that. I remember my grandmother and my mom would sit at a table with bags of prescription medications. And the doctors would tell them that the contraindications between the medications or the dose of that is causing the adverse effect that had him perpetuate some of the conditions that he had, strokes and other things that came from that. So I was always scared of prescription medication. And I was always scared. And when I was diagnosed with the ADD, they put me on medication first. And I discovered cannabis instead and got off of that. And that led to all kinds of interesting things with my parents and getting kicked out and being homeless. But the journey, then navigating through corporate America after that, and I was an entrepreneur. I exited a company and then went to corporate and went into real estate. But one of the things that I started discovering once I started getting to the genetics is that most people don't understand, and even doctors, what genetics do. Because I talked to so many healthcare professionals, they're like, does DNA really matter? It's all about the expression of DNA that matters. My position is like, I live in Los Angeles and I'm from Philadelphia. Now, I can get in my car and I can drive from LA to Philly, and maybe I'll pull up the old map. I'm going to hit traffic. I'm going to make a wrong turn. I'm going to get lost. I'm going to get there eventually, but there's a cost associated with that. Now, when I get in my car and I put on my GPS and I have a destination, I know where to go. It's going to show me where the potholes are in the road. It's going to show me where the traffic jam is, etc. That's where your genetics are. Your genetics are your genetic predisposition. It's your GPS of life. It shows you where your potholes are in the road. Medicine is not used to that, Western medicine, because it's not about preventing things. It's about treating something that's already expressed. So that's why when everybody says, oh, it doesn't matter, it's what's turned on, that's really the difference. And I think when people are born, you have your genes, 50% for your mother, 50% for your father, but your genes are encoding. It's programming that says basically to send a message to a cell and for that cell to create proteins and to turn itself on, the expression of that. When we're born, about 20, maybe 30%, depending on the individual, are turned on. So you're talking about electrician. Think of it as a big circuit breaker box with a bunch of on-off switches. So maybe 20% of them are turned on. The rest of them are up to us to turn on. And the things that turn on or off your expression is, the first one is lifestyle. And what I mean by that is mostly food, what we put in our bodies, how we eat. That can determine epigenetic expression. That's the turning on of the genetic predisposition. The second thing is exposure to things like heavy metals, pesticides, microplastics. All these different things can impact your own your expression, your epigenetic expression. The third is your own neurochemistry. So if you are prone to stress and you're creating a bunch of cortisol expression during the time where there's nothing that's dangerous out there, or not in the morning when you first need it, now you're actually changing your own neurochemistry expression, and which will in turn affect your epigenetic expression, that switch turning on as well. Maybe you're turning things on based on that you're predisposed to, like a disease marker or something like that. So if you're turning that on based on your own neurochemistry, there's things that you can do as well. But if you don't know this about yourself, you're going through life without your life's GPS.
No, that makes sense too. And then there's, whether or not you're able to process certain medications too. I mean, we don't look at genetic testing for medication. It's just a one size fits all. And then we'll just give it a try, see how it works. And then, oh, these complications, go ahead and take this one. We'll see how it works. And then take this one to manage these complications. And like I was reading recently, like even gluten intolerance that a lot of people have. I mean, forget the fact that what we're spraying on our wheat and our bread and everything too,
Right.
but a lot of, there's a good percentage of people that can't process folate correctly.
Mm.
They have that, I think it's 5-HTTP marker.
It's MTHFR.
MTH, that's the one, sorry.
Mhm.
And, so now they think they have an intolerance to gluten or they have some other allergy, but in reality, their body just can't process the folate that we put into our flour to help counteract the way we treat it when we process it, versus like, overseas in Germany and other places, they don't process the bread the same way. And a lot of people are more tolerant to eating bread overseas than you are here in the States.
Yeah, all 100% correct. So there's a series of genes that we have that are responsible. They're called CYP genes. They're CYP450. It's the family of different genes. These genes produce enzymes that help us metabolize something. So you're absolutely right, Jeremy, about the drugs that we consume. First of all, there is a quote unquote safe dose, but it doesn't mean that's the effective dose, right? So if I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer, I may need more. When the doctor tells you you take 2 of these and call me in the morning, why don't we ever say, why 2? Why not 4? Why not 1? And this PGX pharmacogenomics testing shows you what type of metabolizer you may be. How do you metabolize? Rapidly, slowly, normal? And also these contraindications. If you're taking one substance, even supplements, there's some supplements that they're contra indicative of each other. That you can have adverse effects, or you can actually turn down the efficacy of that supplement you're taking by taking another one. The same thing with these CYP genes. So each one of those CYP genes has a family underneath that. You mentioned gluten. There's one for gluten metabolism. Absolutely. There's one for lactose metabolism. So unless you have a disease like celiac, for instance, you may have these predispositions to gluten metabolism, and you may be a poor metabolizer of gluten, which is fine. Doesn't mean that you can't eat gluten. It means that you will have an inflammatory response because your immune system is going to overreact to that something. So yeah, these are all the things that we need to know about ourselves. And look, in Western medicine, it's about treating a symptom. And you're absolutely right. Like if I come in, I use this example, I come in with elbow pain to the doctor. Well, the doctor asked me a bunch of questions. Did you hit your elbow? Were you playing tennis? Like, is it sore? Are you working out? Or can send you to a test to see an MRI. I don't see any structural damage. But how do we win? And this is on us too, as patients of these doctors. So what do we want to achieve? Well, we want to take care of the pain. Well, the pain is a signal, but we are so pain averse that we want to take care of the pain. So the doctor says, well, I can give you an injection or I can give you a pill for that. Win-win. The doctor did no harm, gave you something that treated your symptom that you said you had and it was uncomfortable for you. You no longer have the pain. The doctor pats himself on the back. I did a good job. You're happy because you got your injection, your pill. Well, it came back in a month. What's going on? Well, maybe we need to raise the dose. And we keep doing it. Oh, but by the way, I'm also constipated because of this medication and it's causing some other, don't worry about that. I got a pill for that too. So nobody said, what is the root cause of this pain in your elbow? What's actually causing that? Well, what if it's stress related? Well, what do you mean? How can that possibly be stress related? What does my elbow have to do with stress? Well, we talked about cortisol. So if I'm walking down the street and a car comes out of nowhere and almost hits me, I have a bunch of different neurochemicals that are expressed in my bloodstream. I have some dopamine, I have some adrenaline, I have some, norepinephrine converted, I have some cortisol. Well, then your brain says, there's no lion chasing me in the jungle. I'm fine. Let me reuptake all those neurochemicals that I just secreted and let me release new ones to get me back to homeostasis or balance. If you have a genetic predisposition where you're metabolizing or not producing enough of your own endogenous a neurochemical that can get you back to homeostasis or balance, what happens is that cortisol can stay longer in your bloodstream. And if it stays longer in your bloodstream, now your immune system can overreact to that. And what do we feel? Inflammation. And usually it starts in your joints, ankles, knees, hips, neck, back, elbow. So how is it related? Well, that's an example of how it can be related. And these are the things that we can actually know in advance so we can be ahead of it. But we have to do a better job of being our own. I'm not saying be a doctor, because in the US, we do an exceptional job at acute care. Like if I, God forbid, have to have a surgery or any type of procedure like that, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. We're exceptional at that. Preventative health and something that is, let's get ahead of this issue before it happens. That's something that we don't do a great job at.
And I agree 100% with that one. It's just, I mean, in the long run, it would save more money, but for them to learn how to do it and to actually implement these things, it probably costs them more money up front, and that's why they just don't want to do it. But, you know, you have insurance companies making billions of dollars and doctors fighting just to get their small cut. Like, it just becomes ridiculous. I know a lot of friends who have their own practices, whether they're a chiropractor, acupuncturist, and 90% of their time these days is just spent fighting the insurance companies to try to get a portion of the bill paid. And I can't even imagine on a larger scale, doctor. But yeah, if we could focus on preventative, the right types of food, you don't have to be a hardcore, gym rat, gym bro, but you can still be in shape. You can go for your walks. You can maintain a decent pace. You can be able to pick up the kids should be outside playing and having that exercise and that movement, not just staring at a screen. It's like you said, the food. I mean, I used to have such horrible shoulder pain and I always blamed it on an injury in the military. But once I changed my diet, the inflammation went down. And yeah, I still had a problem there that needed to be fixed, but it didn't hurt as much anymore.
Mm.
I was getting cortisone shots in the military, and they would last maybe a week, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was really looking at my food and changing what I was eating truly, shifted that dynamic.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. And, you know, um, it's also the whole insurance model. And I understand, look, I understand that there's actual scientists and now there's AI to do calculations and algorithms of what something should cost and how to reimburse. But, doctors are spending half their time filling out paperwork for insurance companies that may or may not reimburse them. And, that's why a lot of doctors are going to functional medicine and taking cash. Um, I don't know if you know who Peter Attia is, but he's a doctor. I hate the word biohacking. I can't think of a better word to describe him. He's a function medical professional, speaker, really really intelligent guy. And he was speaking at this event that they call A4M, this conference. And one of the things he talked about, which is really interesting, he said, look, we talk about universal health care and all this other stuff because I have a different idea. What if we offer Medicare to everybody as, from the time they're born? And we give it to them and they earn points as they continue to create anything preventative. So screenings, all these, as they get older, when they turn 65 or where you are when you get Medicare, now you have to pay for your Medicare. You pay based on how much preventative work you did before that time. Now you're putting in the money into the system based on that. Yeah, I mean, we're going to tax the system a lot more when we're 70, 80, et cetera. But if we did a lot of the work up front, maybe it'll help to reduce the burden because we did it all up front. Whether it ever passes or not, I doubt it very much, but great idea.
Yeah, there's no money in it, so I doubt it'll pass. But no, it's that preventative work needs to be done for everyone. We need to stay in shape. Like most of us, I would say all of us should not be dying at the age of 60 or 65 if we take care of ourselves. And I'm not perfect, but I do what I can and I try to get better every day, and that's all you can do. Because I know somebody's watching, oh, well, I have this issue, I have this issue. A lot of our issues, just starting with food, can be solved. It's
Yeah.
been proven time and time again. But going back to the DNA testing or genetic testing,
Yeah.
where can someone do that and actually have a doctor look at it? I guess is the follow-up to that.
Yeah. So when we first launched our company, I mentioned cannabis briefly, but the the reason why I created the test in the first place was we created the first endocannabinoid system genetic test. And the reason why is I got involved in the dispensary business in LA. We used to have 5 dispensaries, and I would see people consume the same varietal and have a completely different experience. So for me, that was like, oh, well, I need to, hyper focus because that's what happens when you get excited, you hyper focus. So I was like obsessing. And I found a video. I'm like, this guy is genetically sequencing the plant. So I'm like, this is interesting. Let me get involved in that, which I did. And I learned about the genetics of the plant. And I got into the human side and sort of started the company in 2017. And we have a patent. We filed a patent and we received it on the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system. And that was what we did for years. We sold a direct-to-consumer test, and that test is still available on EndoDNA. It's the only one that we sell direct-to-consumer because a doctor, cannabis is still not medically federally legal, and the doctor can't recommend it. So we can sell that test provided to an end user, and they can go take the results to their doctor and discuss it with them. All the other, so we did that for years until the end of 2024. And then I got a call from a doctor friend of mine, and she said, hey, Len, I got these young women that are coming in. Her specialty is female hormone health. That is what she does. She focuses on that. She goes, women in their late 20s, early 30s are coming in with perimenopause symptoms. It's like, wow, that's super young. Like I have a daughter in her early 20s. It's crazy to think about that. Maybe it has something to do with the food, maybe the hormones in our food. Maybe it has to do with the hormones in our water. Who knows? But I would lean into that a little bit. And
Yeah.
maybe that's the case. And then she said, I have a lot of women are coming in with really adverse effects of menopause, like hot flash severity and hot flash frequency and weight gain and sleep issues and all these other things. And she goes, is there a way that we can use a test to get ahead of that? So I have a tendency to say yes right away. And I figured out later, I'm like, yeah, of course we can. Then I went to my team, like, can we actually do this? And they said, yeah, we have to build a female hormone health test. So we did. And then we built a male hormone health test. And we shifted our business completely to B2B. And the reason why is because we figured out that the doctor is really our customer. And the reason why is when you go to this doctor that I just mentioned, she's doing all the testing up front. So you have your blood work, you have your genetic test, you have all this stuff. Now you get all this information. It's a complete picture of her patient. And now you can provide a protocol. And the other thing that I learned is, well, doctors don't really understand genetics that well. And I was doing a talk and then got done talking. I said, is there any questions? It was like crickets. I must have done a really bad job or something. But I gave my contact information. Here's my phone and here's my email. If you have any questions, contact me. So like within 30 minutes, I started getting emails and texts from doctors that were in the audience. So I guess they didn't want their colleague to hear them ask a dumb question. So I started getting these questions. I'm like, well, wait a second. I think these doctors don't really understand genetics. And I'm not saying that all the doctors don't understand genetics, but they took it in medical school, or they took it somewhere in college, but they never really, in their practice, they never had to do that.
It's not their specialty anymore. It's
not their
they're
specialty.
focused on these narrow roads of specialty, and genetics isn't one of them.
Exactly. And then so I said to my team, my engineering team, I said, is there a way that we may be able to give doctors a tool that'll help them to understand genetics and actually know how to utilize it? So we build our platform. It's called BIOS. And what it does, it helps you to chat with your DNA. So now the doctor doesn't really have to understand genetics because it's a decision support platform where a doctor can utilize, they can swab their patient, they can get their blood work. It takes in all that information and we build it with the AI, machine learning, and we grounded it on Anthropic's healthcare model. We build our own guardrails and everything. So it's a very intelligent platform that allows you to interrogate the genome and give doctors things that are critical that they need to be aware of or likely impactful in their protocol, not just looking at their genetics, but looking at their genetics, their blood markers, everything, and then provide them treatment plan suggestions that are personalized to the individual. And the treatment plan suggestions are in 3 sections. The first one is pharmaceutical intervention. So anything that the doctor has to prescribe. So it could be hormone optimization, for instance, as an example, on a hormone side. The second one is supplementation. So that's anything like vitamins, nutrients, minerals, or could be peptides or anything like that as well. And the third is lifestyle. So lifestyle can be, diet, exercise, or it could be red light therapy, sauna, etc. So the doctor gets to check off what is being recommended or suggested to them, and they get to add that into the treatment plan. So now the doctor has a treatment plan for you, and then it's in the patient portal. And the patient has that as well. So it's an accountability plan. So now we're partners with our doctors. When we come back in 3 months or whatever the doctor says, come back 3, 6 months, we can do an epigenetic test and we can see what's actually how well the protocol is working for the individual, what's been turned on, what's been turned off. And then the machine learning algorithm can make additional suggestions to modify that protocol. So it's always learning and it's always honing in and getting more and more precise and personalized. So once again, the answer to your question is on EndoDNA.com, a doctor can go and sign up for the platform. The only one we sell direct to consumer, like I said, is the endocannabinoid system test. but a doctor can use this in their practice. And if you have a doctor that doesn't do genetic and epigenetic and all that testing, you can ask your doctor to go to endodna.com and get those tests for themselves.
Interesting. And with the cannabis ones, were you finding kind of the same thing as what it sounds like, that based upon genetics, certain strands? I mean, was it really down to the strain, or was it more like this person does better on indica, this person does better on sativa, this person does better on hybrid?
Well, you're talking my language now. I wrote a book about this too.
I'm here
It's
in
funny.
Washington State, so we got it here too.
Yeah, well, I'm in California,
Yeah.
so it's we're. I wrote a book. It's called Making Cannabis Personal, and I'll explain the way it works. So when we met with the FDA originally, I think in 2018, we had a conversation. They asked us, "What is the purpose of your test?" And it said to help people either avoid or mitigate a possible adverse event. They said, "Great. You can't make any claims, and you can't talk about a disease." So in our test, we can't talk about Parkinson's, but we can talk about tremors associated with Parkinson's. So we have to navigate that carefully. But we look at every single genetic marker that is associated directly or indirectly with the endocannabinoid system. Now that we know where your predispositions are for adverse effects, possibly, now the platform can make suggestions on, because THC, Delta 9 THC, has a very narrow therapeutic window. And some people that are predisposed to stress reactivity or PTSD, if they're taking too much or the wrong terpenes are the essential oils of the plant, it gives them its smell, but also has an effect in conjunction with the cannabinoids or phytocannabinoids. And then it gives you a suggestion on a ratio, possibly like, get closer to 1-to-1 CBD to THC, and I'll give you suggestions in terpene profiles as well. So things like beta caryophyllene and linalool that may be calming without being sedative. And now it'll look at the certificate of analysis from a manufacturer, and it'll show you how close that product matches the suggested ratio. And also looks at dosing based on your metabolic function, and it looks at prescription medication if there's any contraindications between drugs that's published. So it gives you a pretty complete picture. But I really think that people confuse drugs in general. Like they don't understand that, prescription drugs, they start out as plant medicine for the most part anyway, and then they synthesize them and create a synthetic version of that. But I don't think people realize that it's not the drug. It's not what you take. It's what's going on inside your body, your neurochemistry. And when we talk about the endocannabinoid system, there's endogenous endocannabinoids that we release. The plant provides you phytocannabinoids that bind to receptors in our bodies and release those endogenous. That means we produce ourselves neurochemicals. And that's where I think people get really confused, or they start pointing at, the substance. Oh, this cannabis did this for me. But if we drink too much alcohol, are we calling Casamigos and saying, hey, George Clooney, why did you sell me? I drank so much tequila, I can't even smell it for the next couple of weeks. I never understood that. But, cannabis has this kind of stigma associated with it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go back in time for that one, a lot of that deals with the paper industry,
William Randall
and,
Hearst. Yep.
yeah, and even cotton, because I mean, hemp was used for so much stuff, and then it became, I think they were even using it for gas at one point too, and that was part of it. But it was such a diverse plant, and it grew so quickly that you didn't have to wait, years and years for these trees to grow for you to chop them down. And, the hemp plant was just like, yeah, here's a crop in a season, and now we can do all this cool stuff with it. But yeah, it just became like a political thing, and that ousted, and then it became, the war on drugs. And yeah, there are people who abuse things, don't get me wrong. I was using cannabis when I was self-medicating for my PTSD, and it helped a little. But then over time, it just got to the point where I was just doing it too much, and I wasn't using it the way I should be using it as a medicine. It just became this perpetual recreational thing. And having a test to know, like, because that's what we used to do was we'd go in the dispensary and it'd be like, all right, let me try a little bit of this one, this one, this one, this one. And then you'd take it home and you'd have to write down, what it did. Was I couch locked? Was I able to focus? And it wouldn't matter if it was a sativa or indica or hybrid because each one would just do something unexpected sometimes. I would have like a 100% indica where I'm expecting to be couch locked, but I had all this energy and I could go out and do all this stuff and I felt great. And then I would take a sativa and I'd be couch locked.
Yeah. I don't think there's such a thing as sativa and indica anymore. They don't exist.
Yeah.
So what everything is a hybrid. And you have to look to see what is the profile, what the cannabinoids and what the terpene profile is, which will help you determine whether it's going to be more sedative or it's going to be more energizing and how it matches your genetic predisposition. So if you're prone to stress reactivity, for instance, and it's genetic, and by the way, it's highly related to PTSD, and then also your ability to have a traumatic event in your life that you sort of suppress that can be pulled up when you're in a stressful event. So if you have this, like once again, the amount of THC, and we've gotten to a point where we have stuff that's 99% THC. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now, is there a use for it? Probably. It's like the same people that get the morphine drip and they're in a lot of pain in the hospital. I'm sure that having a 99% THC concentrate is probably helpful for to alleviate that. But for day-to-day, therapeutic use, you don't really need that much THC. That's why back in the day when we had the seeds and stem weed with 7%, 8% THC, okay, that was good. But now you go into a dispensary and you're getting 30% THC flower. It's a huge difference. So the amount of THC makes a difference, and that terpene profile makes a difference. So if you have the stress reactivity markers and you consume something like that's, as you would say, sativa dominant, right? So it has a lot of limonene, pinene, these terpene profiles. You can smell them too. Limonene has, citrusy smell. And they can actually turn on your epigenetic markers for stress reactivity and also PTSD. So if you and I are, consuming some cannabis together, all of a sudden our hearts will pump faster. Normal, it's a vasodilator. It'll dilate your blood vessels, your heart will pump faster. However, one of us, let's use you as an example, may trigger that stress reactivity gene. And now you're like, oh man, like I remember this last week. It happened to me. It gave me some anxiety, some stress. And now that stress can turn on your PTSD expression. And you can have that memory of wherever you were deployed or whatever, something happened. Now you're not just dealing with, you and I are consuming some cannabis. Now you have a memory that just got pulled up that has been suppressed into your subconscious. And that's not therapeutic and it's not fun. So understanding this about yourself will create a profile of, like, I would want to go to a dispensary. First of all, and this is really controversial, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. I don't think we should get cannabis from a dispensary anyway. We should be able to go to our CVS or Walgreens, whatever it is, go into an aisle, know exactly what we want, and go get it. So it's going to be therapeutic. But, hope maybe one day it'll happen. But we need to understand when we go into a dispensary, the first thing we need to do is know what to avoid. Like if I'm prone to stress reactivity, I'm going to stay away from things that trigger stress, that create that anxiety. Anything that's dominant, sativa, okay. But I'm also looking at 30% THC with all these, it may actually highlight that expression. So something that's more calming, I think, will be more aligned with CBD. They'll kind of take the edge off too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, it's the strength is just crazy these days. Like I haven't been in a dispensary in years now, but I remember going into them and it was just like, all right, I'm looking for something that can do this, this, and this. And the Bud Barn tenders, I mean, they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They don't know any better. They haven't been trained, and it's just, well, this one's good.
Yeah, I like this dab. Yeah, let's dab. Yeah.
This one's all right, and this one's cool, and it's like, all right, I guess I'll just try it and see what happens. But yeah, we used to have a notebook where we'd write all this stuff down, and then you finally find the perfect strain, and it'd be gone and never come back because they cycle through so much stuff, and it was just a weird, it's still a weird time with it. But yeah, I mean, being able to go to like a CVS or something would be cool. It just, it wouldn't be flour, right? It would just be this synthetic stuff. Like, that'd be my only caveat.
It doesn't have to be synthetic, and it could be flour. It could be tinctures,
Hmm.
and but I don't think any doctor will ever prescribe anything for you to combust to smoke. I just don't see it ever happening. So there's always going to be like that Anheuser Busch industry, and then there's going to be the craft brewers. I think it's always going to stay. But if you have packages that give you like the way I would there's nutraceuticals, right? The problem with the industry is if I get a cannabis varietal in LA and I go to Washington, I get one in Seattle or somewhere like that. What's written on the label is not going to be the same. There's no consistency on there. Like I can
That is true.
go and buy a nutraceutical or buy a supplement in Philly, LA, and Seattle. There's an oversight. Like I know what's on the label. We don't have that. So first of all, we need to have consistency of labeling. We need an oversight on a federal level so we know exactly what we're putting in our bodies. And it doesn't have to be synthetic. We have these nutraceuticals that are available, all kinds of different things. We have peptides now, amino acids that we can buy. There's stacks. It's not just one-offs, but there's an oversight committee that sees that. Maybe it's the FDA that looks at regulating what's in the products that we put in our bodies. But at some point, you're right about the CVSs and all that stuff. They probably will not have flour, but at the very least, you can buy natural tinctures. There's already at least one FDA approved product that's derived from cannabis for childhood epilepsy called Epidiolex. So we can get into that direction. The challenge with the pharmaceutical industry is they don't do well with many compounds. So it's like single molecule, but many different things together. They just don't know how to get past the FDA, and they label as nutraceutical when it has a lot of different ingredients. So we do have a path for that as well.
Okay, yeah, I bring that up because I know in Oregon they do. You can get mushrooms and ayahuasca and things like that, but it's the synthetic version, and they're using it for like therapies and stuff. And
Yeah.
to me, that takes away the power of the plant as well, right? Because they're all healing plants. They have their own essence and their soul, and it's when you make a synthetic copy of it, it's just not. It's not the same. It might kind of treat the same, but it doesn't get. It's hard to explain, but from a shamanic perspective, it's like it doesn't get down into your soul as much too. Versus,
It'll never work the same way
yeah,
because look, the pharmaceutical industry already has synthetic THC. They have Marinol pills, and they started using them for AIDS patients, cancer patients back in the day, and the only effect that was consistent between cannabis or delta 9 THC and the Marinol pill was it was sedative. But the munchies that they needed because they were trying to get them to put on weight, it didn't have that. So it's not just a single molecule, it's the entourage, it's the connection between all the different molecules that are in this plant. They can't replicate. They're never going to be able to replicate. Now, can they use the plant to create a concentrate that they can know how to dose correctly? Yeah.
yeah,
Press it, add heat to it, put it into a bottle. Now it comes from the plant, but it's consistent every single time. And if the pharmaceutical industry would like, and they will get in that because it's going to be rescheduled, Schedule 3. So it's going into that direction at some point in the very near future. And that's probably what we should expect.
nice. And when you were doing your research with the book and working with that company, like what were you finding good uses for cannabis for like the common ailments that we have? You mentioned Parkinson's. I've heard stories. I've never met anyone who did it, but curing cancer with cannabis, tumors.
Yeah, I have to be really careful about
I
making
say
claims.
treating the symptoms of
Yeah.
these.
I, so uh, lots of different things. You know, I think kind of like the way to explain it is we have this endocannabinoid system, and the endocannabinoid system it was only discovered in 1992 by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, who passed away a couple of years ago. He's an Israeli scientist, and he found this system that is our modulating system. And what makes it really unique, its responsibility is to maintain balance or homeostasis within our bodies. And the way that it does that, it gets signals from the other systems in our bodies and sends it up the central nervous system, like salmon swimming upstream to the brain. So if it feels, if it senses, and there's a communication part of it, that your immune system is out of balance, it sends a signal. Then your endocannabinoid system releases two endogenous, that means we produce ourselves, endogenous neurochemicals. The first one's called anandamide. The word ananda means bliss in Sanskrit. So this is our bliss neurochemical, AEA. And the second one is called 2AG, and that one's released as well. Now, when we don't have enough of our own naturally producing endogenous endocannabinoids, or they're not functioning the way they should be, we get it from the plant. When we consume the plant, THC, or delta 9 THC, is decarboxylated, which means it's heated. It drops the acid molecule from the plant and has a perfect three-prong receptor binding affinity for the CB1 receptors. The CB1 receptors are located on most of your central nervous system, your brain and central nervous system. So when it binds to that, it releases anandamide. When you consume CBD, cannabidiol, in also decarboxylated state, it has an affinity for the CB2 receptors, which are located in your immune, digestive system, etc. So the combination of the two can get a person closer and regulate that system that's out of whack or out of balance. So disease-wise, if you have overactive immune response, underactive immune response, cannabis can help regulate that. So Parkinson's is a perfect example of that. Autism, there's kids that we've dealt with, and actually adults that are on the spectrum and have certain conditions that cannabis has been effective for. As far as cancer goes, we've seen, so there's a doctor named David Miri, that he goes by Dedi. He does research in Technion University in Israel, and now he uses AI. And the thing with cancer is they create what's called apoptosis. The cell actually eats itself. So it's cell death when the cell starts consuming itself. And the reason why it does that, you're blocking its ability to do two things. Number one, to replicate itself. So it stops to replicate itself. And number two, it cuts off its food supply. So if it's not getting the food that it needs from that cell that it connected to, now it's going to start consuming itself. And that's where apoptosis goes. The tricky part of it is he's got, the reason why I bring him up, and he has got a video on YouTube. He's got like 3 petri dishes across, 3 petri dishes down. And each one of these petri dishes has a different type of cancer from different persons. So it's like breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer. I'm just throwing out, I don't remember what they are. And he puts in the same exact cannabinoid varietal in each one. Some of them, it kills a cell. Some of them does nothing to the cell. Some of them actually has increased activity. So to find the right, mix of cannabinoid and terpenes for the right cancer, that's really when you start getting, cures and treatments. But I had a previous company to this, and all we did was deal with late stage cancer patients that are given less than a year to live. And across the board, we've extended life like manyfold. I had a person that had 7 months to live, they lived for 7 years. Nice. So at the very least, you're creating a better quality of life for some of these people, even if you're not curing the actual cancer, which is ultimately the goal. But yeah, all kinds of conditions, especially gut health conditions, we've been able to address, anything that is related to immune response, anything that's related to something that is out of balance, basically. So if your body is attacking itself or creating something that's out of balance, because a lot of times, like we were talking about stress, that cortisol level can actually trigger your gut health issues if you're predisposed to them. Like if you're predisposed to IBD and you have this expression of cortisol, well, it can trigger the expression of those gut health issues as well. So these are all the things that you can address with cannabis.
Okay. Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of cool stories. I've seen a lot of videos online of like people with Parkinson's where they're shaking and they can barely hold anything, and then someone kind of like just puts the joint up to them. They take a small inhale, and then you just see them like just slow down, and then finally they just can just sit and actually breathe and not have to shake all over the place. And you just see this like look of relief on their face, and it's just amazing to watch. And it's like nature has all these amazing things that we can use. It's just, again, like we mentioned, stupid politic laws that were issued out in like the early 1900s that have nothing to do with reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a woman that called me. His mom. By the way, I'm not advocating anything for anybody that's underage. So the parents need to make a decision for themselves. But she has two pretty severely autistic kids, and she came to like I know it's sort of cannabis' last resort now, unfortunately, but it is. And they were going to kick the kids out of school. They were super disruptive. The one kid didn't sleep at all at night, and she was just having such a hard time. She's like, I don't know what to do. So we did their genetic tests. We suggested some profiles, some tinctures she would put it into their juice or their milkshake. I don't remember what it was. And she actually left me a testimony. She called me like this. She got a letter from the school. She goes, I don't know what you've been doing for the last several weeks, but we have 180 change in the kids. They're sitting in class, they're attentive, and she's like, and they're sleeping through the night. I just can't believe it. So, not it's not for everyone, but when you find the right match, why not? And the adverse effects are so minimal compared to prescription medication. I don't see why not give it a shot.
No, no, it makes sense. And yeah, if it's a child, a parent needs to make a decision that's best for all of them. It's not a one size fit all. And I mean, just for anybody, it's never a one size fit all. And I wanted to touch up on, because you mentioned peptides, because that's kind of like the hot new thing these days. Everyone's talking about it. The FDA is looking at changing some of
Mhm.
them or approving some of them. The biggest issue I've been seeing is like you don't know where they're coming from when you order them online for some places. And then other ones, it seems like there's only real testing on animals or rats. Like
Yeah.
there's never really a lot of testing on people and good documented research, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of peptides are coming from China these days, and it's not regulated, and that's the issue. I mean, like, y- you know, in the United States, we have this tendency to follow, right? So all of a sudden, there's GLP-1s,
Hmm.
and everybody's like, "Oh, well, wait a second, I can take a shortcut and lose weight. Great, let me take this GLP-1 inhibitor and use that Ozempic and all the other names. Okay, well, how well tested is that, and what is that supposed to do? Well, it's supposed to be for diabetes, but guess what? The effects are that you also lose craving for certain foods. But if you continue to do that, and you're not adding resistance training to that, now you're also losing muscle mass. You're losing bone density. So that's where you see a lot of people in LA, they have this Ozempic face.
Yep.
But what that does, it opens up the floodgates for different types of peptides or aminos. And really what you're doing is you're creating these amino acids that are the building blocks that can actually do certain things that you are stimulating your own production of these proteins within your body. And there's different ones for different things that you can do. Uh, you're absolutely right. Testing is minimal on some of these. On some of these, there's a lot of testing, and there's a lot of um, there's a lot of testing that's done by observational studies. So meaning that you have real world evidence. People have taken them, people have reported, and there's databases for a lot of that stuff. The FDA is trying to figure out, at first they ban everything and they start, releasing some of these things. So there are a few that have, proven testing, and there's citations that are peer reviewed, and there's some that are not. One of the things that we do in our platform, going back to EndoDNA, in the BIOS platform, we train the platform when they make suggestions to look at every citation and grade the citations. So what peer-reviewed references have been there, we have a grading system for the references depending on how many people participated, et cetera. So when a doctor looks at a peptide stack, they can read to see, all right, you know what? The research on this is really, really strong. So I feel comfortable making that recommendation. On these, the research is not that strong. And then you're absolutely right. You have to qualify, where is this coming from? Is this coming from a legitimate, compounding pharmacy in the U.S., or is it imported from China? Because you may get synthetics instead of, some of the other ingredients.
Yeah, because that's the one thing I've been seeing with the GLP-1 stuff and doing some research on that. It's like it freezes a person's stomach or their intestines, like the muscles in it, and then they're not processing food. And sometimes they'll have food just sitting there for months at a time, and it just starts going bad and then causes other issues. And I can see the point of it if you were like, last resort, maybe 500-600 pounds, and you needed to do something to get a jump start, but not just to lose 20 pounds, right? Or 40 pounds. Like a lot of these people are just, to me, they're hurting themselves in the long run.
Yeah. And I agree with you that, the idea of this is to get somebody stimulated enough where they can lose a little bit of weight if they're obese, and then get motivated enough to go and continue modifying their food and exercise and all that stuff. But different peptides are used for different things. We use peptides in skincare for a very long time. There's topical peptides. There's all kinds of other peptides that help with wrinkle repair, under eyes. We've used them for a long time. They've had proven results. Some vary or not, but putting it inside it, we've used a lot of, I know athletes have used a lot of recovery supplements, peptides, mostly aminos. There's a stack of BPC 157, if I remember correctly. That is one of the most tested peptides for athletic recovery that's been used. So we have some that have a lot of testing, and then there's some that really don't, and these are the things that we have to be aware of, and we have to do a better job of not jumping and following, but doing our own research, not just listening. We can all, AI it and research it, or, you can look within something like EndoDNA to be able to help guide you on what to take.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% opposed to them. I'm always worried about efficacy on anything I get off the internet.
Sure.
Especially these days, you can buy anything you want for like $100, and then they'll just send it to your house with a bunch of needles and see what happens.
A lot of the stuff is not very efficacious. Some of it is. A lot of the stuff has minimal side effects. I haven't heard of major side effects reported, but you're also, creating very expensive urine at some point. Yeah. You're not really metabolizing very little of it. I mean, you're injecting it, but the oral peptides, you're not getting much of anything. It's also with vitamins, you're taking vitamins sometimes, and how much of that is really getting metabolized into your bloodstream, unless you're doing liposomal vitamins, which are encapsulated molecules, are really small in nature, and they should be able to get better penetration into your bloodstream. The rest of them, I don't know how much you're actually getting.
It's true. It's a good point. Well, I appreciate your time, man. This was actually very educational for sure. Like, it's a lot of the stuff I never even thought about, but I've heard about, and it's good for people to be reminded of that. Something as simple as a quick genetic test truly can unlock the door of all the other things maybe you need to look at or should change, and help you actually not accumulate, but accommodate your life better. You know, it's by knowing what does what to you because of your genetic makeup can really help you along the way too, and help you understand things that you can use and things you shouldn't use.
Yeah, just one more thing on that. And I appreciate it. You know, I go through these two sets of people. Ones are like, I don't want to know if it's in my genes. I don't want to know. But I'm like, but what if you can do something about it? What do you mean you don't want to know? Like you would want to know because even if there's something that is all right, so it's in your gene. I'll give you an example. We're doing an Alzheimer clinical trial now. We have 16 citations in PubMed. We do a lot of clinical trial work, and one of the things that's been discovered, like if you have a genetic predisposition in this gene called APOE4, and there's several, it's polygenics. There's a couple of different genes, but that's the main one. You are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's as somebody who doesn't have this. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you know what? My life, I'm going to get Alzheimer's. Well, no, that means that you can take action. What action? As you mentioned, food. Well, there are certain foods because if you know that Alzheimer's has an association with being caused by beta amyloid plaques. Beta amyloid plaques are the same plaques that clog your arteries in your heart. So what does that do? Well, omega-6 foods, seed oils, bad fats, starches, all these different things that we already know. If you know this about yourself, now you can change the way you eat and change the ratio of your omega-3s to omega-6s. Eat more fish oil, eat more avocado, change those things. And don't worry about cholesterol. Once again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not telling somebody don't worry about your cholesterol, but I'm just going to try to use some common sense. Your brain is cholesterol. And if you limit all your cholesterol, you're not feeding enough, cholesterol into your brain. So maybe adding some cholesterol wouldn't be a bad thing. These are all good oils with omega-3s. So instead of saying, well, I'm sentenced to this because of my DNA, maybe change the narrative and say, I know this is in my genetics. What action can I take to make sure that I mitigate the expression of that? And that will empower you more to take different actions in your healthcare journey.
Yeah, as long as you check early enough and not wait until you're like 65.
Exactly.
But yeah, because I think they're calling Alzheimer's now like basically diabetes 3. It's just they're thinking it's the next step past the way diabetes works in a person. But again, it might be controversial to some people, but you can pretty much I might not say fix, but you can definitely counteract all the symptoms of diabetes through food by making the right food choices. And I'll never say you'll fix it completely because everybody's different. But from what I've read and what I've seen and my own journey on stuff like fixing your food gets rid of a lot of those biomarkers.
Type 2 diabetes is completely curable. I'll be the one that says it because I've seen it 100 times. I've seen it in my dad. My dad was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Not the one you're born with, but the one that you get over time.
Yeah.
And through changes entire diet, everything, he doesn't have anymore. His blood sugar is down. He's normal. He wears a glucose monitor that beeps if he gets out of hand or so. But for the most part, yeah, he doesn't have it anymore. I've seen many people that changed that through food as well.
Nice. So why don't you let people know where they can find you? Mention your books again. I'll put it all in the show notes as well in case anyone's interested in reading it or where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so our website is EndoDNA, ENDODNA.com. I'm all the social platforms under Len May. I think Instagram is Len May DNA. I'm pretty active on all of them, LinkedIn, etc. I have a podcast called Everything is Personal. You can get that wherever you get podcasts. And my latest book, since I have a copy, I'll just hold it up for everybody to see. It's called Jack of All Trades, Master of Some, ADHD and Polymathy, Rewind the Modern Brain. It's a very intimidating book of over 400 pages for an ADHD person. So they're going to be like, oh, no, it's too long. I knew that. I anticipated that. So it's got no page numbers. The only thing that it has is sections and chapters. So somebody with ADHD can just say, I'm going to read this, The Responsibility of a Genius, and I'm going to go to that and I'm going to read that section, so you don't have to go and read it from, first page, etc. Because I know the way my mind thinks. Oh no, 400 pages. I'm never going to touch that book.
I never heard of a book without page numbers, man. That's wrecking my mind.
There you go.
Sweet. But yeah, I appreciate your time, man. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if something our guests shared resonated with you, connect out to them. That's what these stories are here for. And if you're looking for deeper healing or support, you can always find me at pnwshamanichealing.com. See you in the next episode.